Welcome to the Crime Redefined podcast, produced by Zero Cliff Media. Coming to you from the US Bank Tower, high above downtown Los Angeles. In our podcast, we drill deep into forensics and criminal investigation from the viewpoint of the defense, as well as explore the intersection of the media and the justice system.
You know, I'm sure you probably have a wide range of, to say the least, of these pro per clients. Do you ever worry about your safety?
Well, I always joke that, you know, because I'm working defense and I'm working on their behalf, no. You know, in fact, maybe I have extra protection, if anything. But, yeah, it's a concern because a lot of times there's maybe some undue pressure on you. For example, a lot of times they'll try to sell me on their case and they'll talk about other factors, and it may or may not be intentional, but I think that's an attempt to color how I might look at the DNA evidence. And obviously if they don't get what they want, then they could turn against me. So, has
that ever happened? Has there ever been any threats or anything?
Luckily not. But you also have to work on your interpersonal skills, and you have to develop trust. You know, they have to trust you, because one of the reasons that people go pro per is they feel like the system is just stacked against them, that the public defender knows the judge, the public defender golfs with the DA, and they're all against him. So, there's a Mayhole Anjaria alter ego, jailhouse alter ego. Is that what you're telling me? Yeah, I guess so, because it's going beyond being a scientist. It all comes back to the science, but it's a little bedside manner as well. And it actually helps me work with attorneys, because now I know what their world is and what they have to deal with and some of the pressures and unique challenges.
So I guess you kind of become a little bit of a Monday morning quarterback as well. I'm sure that your skill set also kind of tends to overlap with, you know, giving them legal advice or being a, you know, part-time psychologist or psychiatrist with them as well, you know, trying to keep everything calm.
Right. I mean, you know, obviously, of course, I can't strictly give them legal advice, but I will tell them, you know, they'll say, hey, listen, when you've had similar cases with this type of evidence, how's it look? You know, what's your honest opinion of what I'm looking at? And I'll call on my catalog of experience and let them know, or I'll let them say, hey, you know, I would ask for this, I would ask for that. And, you know, I work with a lot of other experts and investigators, and a lot of us work on the same case. So I may refer people to a case and say, you know, I really trust this computer expert. You know, you might want to bring him in, and it becomes a little bit wider than just the DNA.
How does it go when you have to tell them bad news?
You got to be straight up with them. That you cannot.
I would imagine these guys probably, you know, smell a liar, you know, a mile away. Exactly,
and there's a lot of things when you start looking at cases that to the layperson, you look through the paperwork. This looks good. This is going to exonerate me, and you can't just play along and say, oh, it might. You just have to shut it down right away. But then you have to be willing to go the extra mile and say, I don't think this is where your case is helpful, but I will find that place and we'll go somewhere else. I understand this looks like, you know, a bright, shiny object, but I'm here to tell you that that's not going to get you what you need.
Do you have any stories around where you've just, you know, had to give, you know, you're looking through the glass at the guy and you just flat out had to give him some bad news?
Yeah, it happens all the time. Now, it's not like I'm doing it's not like a Maury Povich thing where I'm doing the initial DNA testing and we're going to get the verdict, you know, guilty or innocent, you know, you are the father, because I'm reviewing the work of other labs, and sometimes we'll do additional testing. But I look at it the other way, that no matter how much evidence there is, no matter how bad the DNA is, there's still points, fires or anything like that influence me. You just got to keep digging, and, you know, you're there to do a job, which is due diligence on the DNA.
So you're able to, you know, put the face tattoos aside, his location of the conversation that you're having with them, and just say, hey, you know, here's the facts of the case. put aside his previous rap sheet if he has one, and just move forward and say, here's this case. This is how I'm going to look at it. And then just roll from there.
That's exactly it. And I think, you start, I don't know, for me, it's sort of developed my humanity a little bit because, you see someone in an orange jumpsuit, you see face tattoos, and you think a certain thing. But as you start to get to know these people, for whatever faults, you can see the humanity in them. And sometimes you see just a lot of intelligence and you think, boy, look at the way this person is investigating their own case. If they could have used those smarts, for something
right.
else, they could have really been something. And I have to say, in all fairness, we talked about the frivolous reasons for going pro per, but we didn't talk about the positive reasons. And so some of these guys, they want to know their case inside and out, not for bad reasons, but because if they're going to go down, if they're going to be in prison for life or be executed, they want to know the ins and outs. So they want to know that everything that could be done was done in their case. And some of the inmates have just had bad experiences with their attorneys. I mean, it's like any other business. You might get a doctor who's not doing the right things, and it might be the case with the attorney as well. And we'll talk in a little bit, I think, about the public defense system, about how it's wonderful, but the resources are limited. So I think sometimes the inmate might feel like, I'm kind of getting the shaft here with the public defender.
Well, you know what? Let's go on to the public defense. But before that, I just want to kind of close off that little segment there about, one of your craziest stories. It seems like before we kind of teamed up, I'd talk to you, every couple of weeks, and you'd have just, a story that just beat the last one.
Well, I'll give you kind of a positive story first. Did
I put you on the spot with that one to catch you off guard?
Oh, no, there's plenty of stories. I'm just figuring out, which one do I want to talk about first? Okay, well, one time I had a pro per who was a biker, and the very first time I met him at jail, he was drunk off his ass, and I'm talking in jail. And I know that this goes on, there's Pruno and there's drugs in there, but he's like, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you're coming. Today's my party day. Like it was no big deal. One of the first pro pers I had was one of the most memorable. He would always say, I love you. You're my soul brother. He would always want me to put money on his books. And then he actually wanted to do a scam. He said, hey, could you bring me some pictures of some ladies and then I can sell them back here? And, there's very strict rules, obviously, about what you can give an inmate. You're only supposed to give them their legal documents. And I was thinking, let's put aside the absurdity of that. Like, why in the hell would I want to do that? But I'm like, wait a minute. If I do that, I will get thrown off of your case. Isn't it more important that I'm your DNA expert than trying to make you, besides everything else? Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's too funny. He was looking for a business partner and a DNA expert.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had very interesting conversations, and I don't even know how to exactly say this, but, like people talking about some of the interesting things that happen with dead bodies or, that level of detail. You get some very frank talk. In LA County, a lot of celebrities end up, in that county jail. And it's funny that the inmates get starstruck as well. So I can remember a few years ago, I was there kind of late one night talking to a guy, and all of a sudden they brought down Chris Brown. And hey, I wanted to get a look too. But this guy, all he could do was focus on Chris Brown. We were probably a week before trial going through some complicated evidence. He's like, oh, look, there's Chris Brown. And he had one eye on me and one eye on Chris Brown.
That's pretty good, just because I guess, if you're inside, it's TMZ is everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had some interesting situations in court, too. I can remember years ago, one of my early pro pers, I essentially wrote a script for him to cross-examine the Sheriff's Department criminalist, and I then later testified. Same thing, I gave him a script. But I saw the criminalist who was cross-examined at a meeting a few months later. And she goes, hey, did you help on the such and such case? She goes, that pro per gave me a better cross-examination than any attorney ever has.
Well, it sounds like he was getting his state money's worth from you.
I guess so. Yeah.
Let's go ahead and move on to the public defense and kind of what, going back to that original case is kind of the genesis of all this, why people, go pro per and what the issues are, which is the main issue of public defense and how it's in peril.
Right. So you have the right to an attorney, but you don't have a right to Mark Geragos. You are going to be given a public defender. And by the way, in most cases, that's a wonderful thing because these are the men and women in the trenches who have a ton of trial experience. But depending on the jurisdiction, and some of them that we've seen that come to mind are New Orleans, Missouri, there is a huge crisis in the caseloads that the public defenders have, and therefore they can't give their full attention to any one given case.
Do you know what those numbers are for LA County? For defense?
I actually don't know in LA County. I mean, for better or for worse, I haven't seen much in the news about statistics because I've heard other states that there are public defenders who are handling 100 cases per week.
I don't even know how you could have a chance.
Unbelievable. So, I always try to bring this back to forensic science, but okay, those aren't 100 murder cases per week. A lot of them are smaller cases, drugs or something like that. But there's been some lab scandals in recent years, particularly in drug analysis, where the crime lab analyst maybe was addicted to drugs and was stealing drugs, and they weren't actually analyzing them. And when that came out, a lot of these cases got overturned. But you think about it, if you have a public defender who's extremely busy, no fault of their own, and there's a minor case, they might say, well, hey, listen, the crime lab said it's cocaine. You're best to take a deal. It's in your best interest. And they don't have time to necessarily go through and review everything. But sometimes, even the minor cases of forensic error will blow that case up.
Wow. How was your relationship with the public defenders?
Well, I work with them all the time. And so a lot of them have great expertise in DNA because, like I say, they've worked in the trenches. But even if they could do an awesome job, there may be a delay in these cases going to trial. So think about you get arrested and maybe you've got a winnable case. The evidence is really bad. Maybe it's not that serious of a charge. And your attorney says, hey, not a problem. But if they can't get you to trial for 3 or 4 months or even to a preliminary hearing, what's happened on the outside? You're not working, your relationships are frayed. All of those things put pressure on people to say, you know what, I'm just going to take a deal because I got to get the hell out of jail. I can't wait this long. I got to get on with my life.
Exactly. What does that look like as far as what's the time frame for completion of a case, or if there's a big difference between a public defense and a pro per start to finish?
Pro per is always going to take much longer. Easily probably 2 or 3 times longer than a public defender. Private attorney, may go quicker, but then again, the other thing is you want to do it right. Time is one issue, but you want to jump through all the hoops as well. So it's a gamble. Do you wait out a stronger defense and take your chance at trial, or do you take the plea deal and perhaps get back to your life sooner?
Wow. It's the lesson from all this is, what is it? Don't do the crime if you can't do the time.
Yeah. And so, my role is, well, let's give him that excellent service. One way or the other, guilty, innocent. What I can do is in the chaos of a pro per case, I can bring order to that court presentation of the DNA. So I've had a lot of situations where I testify as a witness. I give the pro per a script. You know what? They're standing up in a suit. They're at the podium. They're reading the questions, and man, they look like an attorney. I don't know how the rest of the case goes, but I know I'm going to bring order to that DNA portion.
I guess at the end of the day, for them, that's got to make them feel good. Like, hey, I'm going to represent myself, and I gave it my best shot.
Exactly. Particularly if DNA is the key piece of evidence in their case,
versus maybe a half-engaged public defender nothing against them, but if let's say you're handling, a couple hundred cases a week, how much energy can you put in, to each case?
Yeah, that's just a fact of the budget. And the other thing is a lot of the pro pers are smart enough to know that they're going to handle the front end of the case. That is, they're going to get the experts appointed. They're going to get all the discovery. They're going to file all the preliminary motions, but they know that come trial, they have to have an attorney. So very often a pro per will give up their case at trial because they know that they don't know the courtroom etiquette or the rules or, so they might have a strong case, but if they can't execute, then it's going to be a bad outcome.
Wow. It's an amazing world.
It is. And it's something I didn't know about until I started doing this. I mean, I heard you hear crazy stories in the paper about people representing themselves, Ted Bundy and all this kind of stuff. But I didn't realize how prevalent it was. And I didn't realize that it's not always such a terrible idea to do it.
Do you ever get tired and just go, hey, you know what? I can't work with the pro pers anymore. Is there ever a day where you're just exasperated or frustrated?
Well, I've evolved into kind of the pro per whisperer. And on many occasions, I've been told by attorneys or other experts that, wow, you have a ton of patience. So it just requires that.
Man, some really good stuff.
Yeah. And honestly, for me, it just keeps it interesting, because, looking at DNA results all day, that's one thing, but it's nice to, like I keep saying, to be in that front row of the justice system.
I'd say that's the polar opposite of a 9-to-5 job.
Yes, for sure.
We've been covering a lot of ground on pro pers, and I don't think that there's one that's more higher profile than Ted Bundy. And he's going to be back in the news again because they're actually producing and actually have produced a Ted Bundy movie.
Yes, I'm looking forward to this. Apparently the title is Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile. And I just read an article that they wrapped shooting. They shot for about 8 weeks. And in fact, now they're selling off a lot of the props from the filming. A lot of it, of course, was 1980s courtroom type stuff. And there's some interesting star power behind this.
Yeah, it's amazing how, his whole life, during during his trial and even after has really taken on a cult-like audience. Like, people are really obsessed with this guy.
It really has. It's just never went away. And I understand that Zac Efron is actually going to be playing Ted Bundy, which is interesting.
And then Jim Parsons as well, right?
Yeah, Jim Parsons, I think, is going to be the prosecutor. So that's going to be an interesting interplay of those two.
Do you know what the release date is for that?
I don't. My understanding is they just wrapped on the filming, and it's directed by Joe Berlinger.
Oh, wow. We'll have to make sure that we dissect that once we get a chance to watch it.
Yeah, so given all the issues and stories we just talked about with pro pers, maybe 6 months from now we'll come back after we've seen it and just talk about, is this really a reflection? Maybe it's more just about Ted Bundy and his world, but him being a pro per, I think, is actually a big part of the story.
Yeah, I think it is. And it'll be interesting to see, especially from your point of view, kind of the inside baseball about how he handled being a pro per. And then, of course, how they portray it. Yeah,
exactly. Because, from what I could tell, although he was evil and diabolical, he was quite smart. And that was the whole reason he handled his, besides ego, that's why he handled the courtroom portion of it.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I remember reading something, way back in the day about his IQ.
Yeah, I thought it was quite high.
Yeah, which, makes sense. But then if you combine that with a psychopathic mindset.
If you combine that with a psychopathic mindset and a ton of evidence and multiple offenses, even the best attorney is not going to be able to do much with that.
Yeah, still today, every now and again, you'll get a case or a story that'll come up where they actually really don't know the number, that of how many women.
Yeah, because I think in Ted Bundy, that right before he's executed, he came out with that, hey, there might be 30 of them.
Right. But do these guys ever, on their deathbed, do they ever really tell the truth?
Hard to say.
Probably, they probably have murdered so much that, do they... I bet you some of them don't even know.
I would think. I mean, especially if you're just out of your mind doing it. I mean, how can you maintain an accurate count?
Especially because he covered a lot of ground. He started in, I believe, the Pacific Northwest, right?
I think so.
And then kind of worked his way across the country down to Florida.
Yeah, and I don't know over what year span that was.
Well, I'll be curious to see how this is portrayed.
And just a final note, I have to say, I'm excited that James Hetfield of Metallica is going to be playing a cop in the movie. So I'm equally excited about that.
I'm sure the Metallica fan base is going to be tuning in for this then.
Absolutely. So I can't wait to talk about it down the line.
Smart move by the producers.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Crime Redefined podcast. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Crime Redefined. Please send us your comments and questions and join us for the next episode.